Okay, so I am just making this video, and it probably will cut out during the recording, so I shall try to be brief. Unfortunately, everything is quite controlled with the internet and computer systems and mobile phones and any form of technology. We actually don't realise how controlled it is, although it is shown to be somewhat controlled, but it really is total control because it is designed to read the human mind at a much more intrusive level than what most people realise, until you realise that it actually is transhumanism. It is actually total mind control in the sense that it interacts with your mind, and also it is being used by other human beings to interact with your mind and control your mind. Whether you think that is just innocently to get you to buy products is another thing, or whether it's about completely showing you a false situation or a false reality. In other words, it's giving you information that appears to be the truth but is still misleading you. And that is really what I'm talking about. Now, it just depends on how far you think the conspiracies go, because it is a conspiracy if you think of it that way. In other words, it's where a group of people give you a system that is to serve them, or where they have more control over you. Of course, we have the on and off mind control going on. I can't get the door open, but we have the on and off. When I say mind control, like, do these beings control the noise that comes into the house? And I would say yes, because when you understand frequency and vibration, and you feel the effects of the noise, almost as though they're speaking to you using mechanical sound. See, this is suppressive, covert mind control, or just an annoying noise. But if you consider that it goes on day in and day out, year after year, you have to say either you're living in a noisy time zone suburb where basically the residents like to make or need to make noise 24/7. And the point is that we're told that malignant narcissistic people do need to be seen and heard at all times, or most of the time. And this is how you can tell the personalities of those that operate the machinery or that do these, whether you think they're stage, set up, or real work. Of course, it's real work, but whether it's planned by the city or the powers that be is what you have to decide. That means it's a conspiracy at not just a personal level, but at a higher level. See, so this is how you have to figure that out and say what you think about it. But that will probably only depend on who you are and how suppressed you are by your environment. So, and also how aware you are of this. My own understanding of it is based on my own reality, and I've expressed this over and over again, that it was only when I realised the psychopathic nature of the residents around me in the local area, and that there was more of it, that I became aware, just by chance, that there were much larger numbers of psychopaths in the area than what I would have thought was possible. In other words, because even if you personally have a personal interaction with, say, a psychopath, as I've done, you think that's just one unlucky human interaction. You've picked the wrong person to have a relationship with. But when you actually see that there's more of it around you, and you actually say, well, they say that psychopaths are in a very minuscule number, then you say, well, that minuscule number seems to be a bigger number in the particular area where you are. That's enough to make those psychopaths aware, if they become aware that you're aware. That's the problem. If you become aware of this and they don't, then they leave you alone. But the minute you expose this, whether it be deliberately or accidentally in my own case, then you've set yourself up for them to want to control you, because, as we're told, these particular beings, their whole existence depends on remaining secret, in pretending to be and imitating being, a normal, natural human being. And whichever way you look at it, psychopaths are not normal, natural human beings. We know that. So we know that. And if they, combine in communities, which, we have open communities in the suburb where I am, where they openly show that they, collaborate with the local Inner West Council. There's nothing hidden or secret about that. But what I will mention is what was told to me yesterday, because I have mentioned how even the industries and the council, and these are all the powers that be, but to my way of looking at, they are actually a hidden, secret army of psychopaths if you're a human being, because the minute you become aware of their true nature, then you will be the target of their covert control, and we are aware of this. It's just that usually you think it's personal interactions, but even personal interactions, we're told, most of these beings will always try to get other people to collaborate with them to suppress and control you. It just depends on how many communities they're part of, how many people they have access to, and how much influence they actually have, wouldn't it? But either way, I got information yesterday, which is not hidden. In fact, I wasn't even looking for it. I was just told it, that the Inner West Council, which controls the suburb where I live, they do a lot of gardening and a lot of, community beneficial landscaping and fixing up things. And it became exposed that they were using asbestos in all the gardening. So basically, that's the whole point that I'm getting at. These beings present being all about nature and all about life. So they present and do great gardening and set up very pretty community settings where people can sit and where there's trees and bushes and flowers and life. But they put asbestos substances in the soil and in the materials that they use to keep it going. So that's what I'm saying. All that looks good is really not good underneath, because this became exposed that the local council, this Inner West, which I've mentioned, which really to me is part of a hidden army, and this was openly exposed, not by me. It was told to me that they were creating something that appears to be a benefit, natural and nice and good, and yet they're putting poisonous substances, which means that a human being that sits in amongst the gardens that they create could potentially die, because asbestos is lethal and deadly. So that shows you the nature of these beings and what I'm trying to point out, that they pretend to be real human beings, but they're not. And until a bit of luck comes about to where some things are exposed. But that will soon be forgotten about. It's not like anything will happen about it. In fact, they just actually said, oh, it's a mistake. We were doing it for cheapness, for economy. So you put lethal, poisonous substances that can kill people for economy, and that's okay. Why bother creating your false gardens and your pretense at being, like a good Samaritan, or that you're a good inner West council doing good works in the community, when you're really doing something that looks good, that is hiding the agenda, that it's really dangerous and not good at all, because that proves that, doesn't it? And that's just an example which I was given accidentally yesterday, and rarely do I get given any information against or that actually promotes anything that I say, because I am saying that you have huge, large amounts of psychopathic types of human beings. To me, they're a different species. To me, they are android, artificial androgyne beings. I see this visually and I see this psychologically in my observation of them. And if anyone chose to analyse it or was living here with me, and if they were a real human being but not an android, they would see it too. But they would have to be living here with me for a period of time so that I could show that it's a continual thing and that it is real. Because if you just give a fleeting example like I do in videos, or like this gentleman does on the thing here, I would say that this could be one of the few real human beings that are actually on the internet. So out of the thousands and thousands and millions of videos, particularly on the conspiracy type channels, or on the informative truth-telling channels, shall we say, or any video that exposes the truth about the nature of human beings, or about the philosophical kind of situation that we could be in a matrix, or in other words, a controlled reality. It just depends on how controlled you think it is. No one would deny that all cities are controlled. It's just how much control. No one would deny that there isn't coercion and control on the computer system or the internet, or that many videos are false, and that you have psychopaths pretending to be real human beings, or that you have truth tellers that are really part of the control system. That's what they call last line of defense, because that's a total control. It just depends on whether you trust and believe these individual human beings, whether you think they're false or real. I personally think they're all false. I have studied that, analysed it enough to my own satisfaction to where I don't believe any of them are real. But there is the occasional one, and when I say occasional, it's very rare, but also they will rarely be successful. These videos were all done 4 years ago. Mind you, I will also say that most videos' dates are often changed, which is why I always put an exclamation mark or a question mark after my videos with dates and times, because I know that most of the dates and times on a lot of the videos are changed. In other words, a lot of it can be done right now, this very second, as I become aware of something. Because personally I do see it at a more spiritual, higher religious level. So that means that I do see it as human beings from creation versus the God of earth, which is like the being that some call Lucifer, the false being of light, controlling psychopathic android type beings. Android being simply means technical, whether you are technical, in other words, whether you're a totally artificially intelligent human being in a cloned body, or whether you are just a human being that has agreed to transhumanism and uses technology to control the mind of other human beings. And you are part of keeping this cyborg Earth control matrix going. Because really it is a cyborg Earth control matrix. It's just that it looks natural. Just like the Inner West Council were planting trees and gardens and then putting asbestos on top so that what appears to be natural and healthy and life-giving is really lethal and deadly. That's just an example of what these beings do, and this is how their mind works, and this is how their reality works. So what you think is good information, what you think is truth told by truth tellers, what you think is a benefit for what you believe in, for say a natural free earth, is actually all deception. That's just a community level example of it that was told to me accidentally yesterday, because it's rare for even the androids to express the truth about the environment. But don't forget also that if you have like what I would call renegade psychopaths, in other words, that means where you have psychopaths that aren't part of the religious or the spiritual control system, in other words, where they're not combining with one another, because that can happen too. Sometimes these beings will actually agree with many of the human ideas and will see the environment is controlled. But unfortunately they will still work against individual real humans because that's their nature, because they don't like humanity. That's the unfortunate tragedy of this endgame. So in other words, many psychopaths could be about conspiracies. They could believe that there are a lot of negative human beings, but their problem is that they don't like humanity or anyone or anything. They don't see anything as human or life. So although they will, of course, sometimes agree with the conspiracies and with situations and power plays in the city, so they will support sometimes, like what I'm saying, that many things that are done are not beneficial. They're all about controlling human beings. Every new idea they bring in, more surveillance, more rules, more noisy equipment, more, allowing for safety under the guise of more control. In other words, where you have more noise, like vehicles making more noise, beeping their horns every time they pull in and out because it's a safety precaution. Whereas in reality, it's just more negative frequency and vibration because it's more negative sound, which is frequency and vibration, which makes for a more chaotic, more unpleasant environment to live in. And also this is not conducive for nature either. If you think about it, if you have any mechanical sounds, if you have bright lights everywhere, this is not good for the wildlife or for nature. And yet these same people in the area promote greenies, create a green earth, create saving the natural earth, whereas they're actually annoying the wildlife and actually could even be leading to its destruction, just as they create beautiful natural landscapes and then put asbestos substances on top so that it becomes lethal, even though it looks beautiful and natural and a good idea. That's just an example. I could use a million examples, but that one came to me yesterday from one that actually works against humanity, because, I rarely encounter real human beings that are in agreement with this controlled area. Most of them think that everything is random and normal. But that's also because many what I call renegade psychopaths, that means loner psychopaths or anti-life, but also antisocial psychopaths that don't want to be part of the system or society, which is a good thing. But unfortunately, they also don't see human beings as real, so they won't ever cooperate or collaborate with a human being for their benefit. That's the tragedy of that situation. But what I'm trying to say is that what also makes it deceptive, because you can easily be deceived into having similar beliefs or similar ideas about society. Many people might, or well, not many, but some people might agree with some things that I say about changes in Sydney, but they wouldn't agree with most things. And most are not in agreement with you because they're anti-human, and that's the problem. So if you interact with them on a common agreement, unfortunately they will still try to take you down. So that's the tragedy of it. But most are in a combined operation against humanity in the cities now, because they like to play this video game. For them, it's like a real-life video game when they're stalking and patrolling a real human that they see as their prey or their target. Because if they want to play the video game to fill in their time and make their mind active, because they can't get pleasure out of being human because they're not human. In other words, if they don't experience the 7 positive human emotions, like they don't ever know any form of life or love, they don't experience any form of happiness, they don't feel negative when they do negative things against human beings, because they don't see human beings as life. So they have, as we're told, no guilt, no remorse, and no regret. So they could literally eliminate a human being and they would just see it all in a day's work. In fact, it gives them a sense of power and control, because they're all about power and control. And that power and control means they must control what they see. They must control their environment. This is why we have these covert stalking patrol systems around myself in the suburb of Leichhardt. And the Inner West Council is the controlling force behind that, because that actually operates for the country. All these things are like at a open government policing type of level, just as the police force is the enforcement of law. But if you have like what they call internal affairs, and that's like in that movie where you have if you investigate the police force, like in the movie Internal Affairs, and they do have these false internal investigation things, I would say, because I think everything is controlled at a higher level. But even if you think it's just controlled at a lower level, then you would have like internal affairs, which means that they investigate their own departments to see that there aren't officers in that department that are really not working for the law. In other words, they're really breaking all the laws. And that was like in the Matrix movie, Internal Affairs, where a very prominent policeman was basically doing everything illegal, using the police image and the police profession as a cover, as a protection against being seen as the villain, shall we say. In other words, it was a camouflage. A good camouflage is to work in industries like in very caring industries, like if you're working as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a policeman, as a psychologist, as a psychiatrist, as a truth teller, as a philosopher, as a anything that appears to benefit people, just as the council, the city inner west council of the city of Sydney, where I live, was seen to be creating more trees, more gardens, more life, and appearing to want to save the earth and make it more free and natural, but was actually putting deadly asbestos in those areas, camouflaging its true motives. In other words, like internal affairs where you have a bad cop pretending to be a good cop. That's the same thing. That's the reality, and that's most areas, even though until you see it, or until it exposes itself to you, or until you become the victim of it or the prey of those predatory, essentially psychopathic, malignant, narcissistic beings in human form, or more correctly, they are actually a different species. They are an android, androgyne being, and they are created by a different system. They're created artificially. They're artificial conception, which means that they don't have any spirituality or much humanness, you see. So they're really anti-life and anti-human, but they come in a human form and they hang around real human beings and study them and read their mind, read their ideas, and infiltrate their reality to mimic and copy them so that they can pretend to be the real human being. That way they have a cover, so they're like a bad cop pretending to be a good cop, or a good Samaritan that is really doing nefarious things behind the scenes. That type of thing, even though I am having trouble explaining it. My examples are probably not going to be as good as the false beings on the internet, and I say that because that's also how they cover the conspiracy truth channels or the conspiracy truth information sites. You know, because if you have an android being pretending to be a real human being, just as you have council people doing natural productive work when they're really camouflaging the fact that they're doing deadly work or doing something that isn't a benefit to people and that actually is quite negative. And this is how they succeed, and this is how they cover their tracks, shall we say. And I see this every day. I see this every day because I see through. When I see something good being done, I don't just accept it that, oh, I got it wrong, that they're the good guys. I actually look into it. I think about it. And usually, when I think about it, I say, oh, this is part of more control, or this actually will have negative connotations for something else. And that is why they particularly target real human beings that actually think more about things. Because if you relate more to life just naturally, they will target you and have you as the prey in their patrol control system, because they see that you will see things that other people dismiss or overlook, even if they're a real human being. Because until your life really hits rock bottom, like mine, in other words, to where you actually see the whole, or at least most of the picture of the area, you actually, if your life is not going too bad, you will dismiss a lot of the negative things and think that they're just random and occasional. You won't have any need or reason to look at the whole picture, because you'll be too busy focusing on some positive things in your life. In other words, because you're a human and you want those 7 positive psychological traits, you want to be happy, you want to experience some sort of pleasure, you have some sort of, you lean that way. You don't lead to just control and a negative mindset like the psychopathic types of human beings, or like the androids, because androids have to lean towards negativity, because androids can't experience anything positive, because they're not really human, they're just imitation human beings, really. They pretend to be what they're not in order to infiltrate and coexist with human beings, in order to basically control them out of necessity, because not just that makes them feel powerful, which is their main driving force, I'm told, of the psychopathic, narcissistic, paranoid beings, but also because they need human energy to survive, and they need human energy to give them kind of life. In other words, when the patrolling stalkers walk past me, there's an exchange of energy, because everything is frequency, vibration and energy. So their negative energy is transferred to me, and my positive energy, because I'm a human being, goes to them. So they get a little hit of life, shall we say. And that's why they can jog past you and where you're dragging your feet. But also it's a mind game. And it is because they're all combined with focusing